We are getting festive on this final edition of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break for the year 2025. Coming up, we will talk about the California state budget. Our expert on the budget, Patti Herrera, is here to lay out everything you need to know before the governor's budget proposal comes out in January.
The ACSA Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
And it's just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA's Executive Director. I'm Naj and Edgar, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you here on our final show of 2025. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from. Edgar, an exciting show we have. Last week, I have to make mention of it. Last week, you took our entire staff out to an escape room, and it is my understanding your team did not do well.
Yeah, we did not. I'm actually worried that we might still have some of our staff members stuck in the escape room. We did not accomplish it, so I don't think we took roll at the end of it. But I will say we also did, and we probably missed an opportunity here. I know we had a little family feud type battle amongst our teams, and and we did a little bit better on that end. But yeah, we celebrated the holidays here with the ACSA staff. It was a good time. I don't know that escape rooms are our staff's biggest skill. Well, some I think did better just because they cheated and used too many clues. But
see
the medal. I forgot that you were.
First place. I decided not to wear it because it would clash with this great holiday outfit.
I'm sure you were worried about clashing. The irony there, right?
I was certainly very concerned.
I have to say, Naj, having it be the holiday program did stress me out a little bit because it's a reminder that I don't know that I'm ready for Christmas and I'm way behind, and as I always am, and it's putting that undue stress where like, oh gosh, we're already here. Like this is we're gonna be on break. So but I guess it's a good thing. I know our folks in the field that I've talked to a lot of our folks here over the last week. I know there's always that for the students, I got to spend some time here on some campuses here this week, and just the excitement of that week before the holiday break. I know it makes it sometimes harder for our folks in the classroom trying to keep the students' attention and focus here on the last days, but I know it's a fun time of the year as folks are getting ready to hopefully spend time with their loved ones for a couple weeks.
Yeah, an exciting part of the year. Jason Engel, first one on our chat today. Neri is there. Mary Stark with us today. Shireen Sasser with us today. That was the first group on the chat. So again, welcome. No matter where you're watching, go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello. Patti Herrera from School Services of California, Edgar, is going to be on the show after our news headlines. We had her on a panel discussion a few weeks ago over at the CSBA conference. Really, really good panel discussion on the budget. So looking forward to talking to Patti coming up. A couple of news headlines for you, and this one involving the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education. Since last week's show, the U.S. Department of Education has awarded 65 new grants to strengthen school mental health services. This comes months after the U.S. DOE canceled more than 200 health grants totaling $1 billion. Those grants were canceled because, as we have heard, they did not fall within the Trump administration's priorities. In this new round of grants, 33 of these 65 grants are going to rural states and school districts in the amount of $120 million. The awards, according to the U.S. DOE, will provide support to programs that enhance rural and high-need area capacity to deliver evidence-based interventions, among a number of other things. And then also want to point this out, Edgar, a really interesting article. And this actually came out. It's a report from the Public Policy Institute of California. I know you're aware of this, discussing adjustments to the local control funding formula. These are changes that they talked about in there that we've honestly been hearing about for years. Items like increasing funding for low-income students, who face homelessness, adjusting funding to reflect regional needs, and pivoting to enrollment-based funding. Again, subject matter that we have been hearing about in the field for a very long time. The report details some of the often proposed changes and the fiscal impact to those changes. They consider distribution models rather than just the impact on school funding. So we're going to go ahead and put a link into the chat, Edgar. I know that these are subjects that come up every single year around budget time about maybe we have to pivot. Maybe we look at manipulating the system a little bit so we get budget allocations to the students who need it that maybe not be necessarily represented. So an interesting report for sure.
If I remember correctly, and probably even at the beginning, probably maybe, but in this show a year ago, when we're trying to anticipate what might be some of the big discussions, what are we predictions for the year, I know we did think that there would be an opportunity. There might be some elevated conversations on LCFF. There was some legislative movement there last year about trying to do some reflection on some of the pieces, and there was. I don't know that I would call anything that happened across the street here in Sacramento as real serious talks about tweaking LCFF, and I'm sure amongst other things, Patti, who follows these issues very closely, could give some thoughts about to what extent do we think that this will be a conversation that'll gain some steam here as we enter this last year of the Newsom administration, as we move into a year with a lot of transitions, frankly. That it's an election year. Sometimes it makes it harder to do real big policy there in those last years because everybody's worried about elections, has their eyes elsewhere. But it'll be an interesting one. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? Because we're gonna look back before we look forward. But you reading that story reminded me of some of the conversations we were having about a year ago.
Yeah. A lot has happened this year. Let's be honest. A lot has certainly happened this year. All right, let's go ahead. Let's talk budget. We have the guest that has been here the most times on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, our great friend, her 8th appearance here on the lunch break, Patti Herrera, Executive Vice President, School Services of California. Patti joins us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. She's got her Steelers gear on, Edgar. I'm not surprised as we move our way through the final 3 weeks of the season.
And like this is just conversation came up. They're like, "Who's your team?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm embarrassed to say it's the Raiders." At this point, I don't want them to win a game, so I'm not gonna wear any Raiders gear. And I'm just gonna continue to root for them to lose. So hopefully we get a quarterback one of these days. But props to you, both of you, and your spirit there for your. Historically, and well, I guess I won't throw that shot. I'm in no position to talk about good football team.
Hey, look, 40 years of agony right here, Edgar. This is the first year I've been able to wear this jacket with some actual pride.
For now, Naj. For now, don't get ahead of yourself.
For now, Patti, legislative analyst delivered its budget outlook, and that outlook calls for an $18 billion deficit. They stated that that's about $5 billion larger than was anticipated by the administration in June, despite revenue improvements. Does that figure surprise you as we move into the budget process in the new year?
No, the reason why it doesn't surprise me is because when the legislature and the governor passed the budget back in June, the budget package passed in June did not account for the impact of H.R. 1, the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act by Congress and signed by President Trump on July 4th. So we had passed our budget without contemplating the budget impact of H.R. 1. I will say that I anticipated that H.R. 1's changes to Medicaid and Medi-Cal and CalFresh because of the changes to the federal programs. In the LAO's report, they sized that at about $1.3 billion. I honestly thought it would be more, and I knew that it would hit us in 26-27 going into this budget and this fiscal year because of the timing of the implementation of H.R. 1. Which was it's a late 2026 implementation. So it didn't surprise me that despite our revenue growth unanticipated revenue growth, that the budget problem got bigger because of HR1. I think it was because of HR1, and of course the LAO had some other explanations for the size of the deficit.
Patti, thanks as always. Congratulations on officially being the highest ranking guest here on Legislative Lunch Break. And apparently, you know, and we were making note, like as the numbers were trickling in, you do draw a crowd, right? Like, you make sure you tell John Gray that he never got these kind of numbers.
Okay, I gotta tell you,
you mentioned that to him. When
Naj reached out to me for this, I'm technically on vacation today, but I was like, does this mean I'm going to beat John Gray's record? Yes, I'm going to do it. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, it's so humbling to always be invited back to join you guys. It's so fun. I love these things. And more importantly, I just hope that I'm able to share some information that ACSA finds insightful.
You always help us digest kind of what this all means. And then on that note, Patti, I know one of the things that's gotten folks a little bit confused, right? So on one end, the LAO notes that there's going to be revenue gains, and that are largely offset by the constitutional obligations, right? Particularly Prop 98, Prop 2, and that given that they're saying Prop 98 increasing by 5.1, what does this look? Make sense for this, like in terms of, okay, revenue's up, but we have these obligations. Should they anticipate one-time dollars? I know that's something that we've been hearing. Naj mentioned that panel you were with us and a number of our superintendents a couple of weeks ago. I know that was a big part of this conversation. So kind of like, what do you anticipate when what's going to be the net effect of all of these factors coming together?
Yeah, I think what the dissonance that people have a hard time reconciling is that state revenues are up by a lot. And they wouldn't have expected the LAO to come out and say, and the budget deficit got bigger by $5 billion, right? And the question or what the issues that you're raising, Edgar, is the impact of Proposition 98, and as also Proposition 2, or what we would refer to as the state and education rainy day funds. So basically, and this was unsurprising to me, for those of us who really watch state revenues and watch what's contributing to those state revenues, we would have told you that we would have expected this. So because the state revenues, the unanticipated state revenues are largely attributable to capital gains, the state constitution, for purposes of the Proposition 98, reserve deposits, as well as the state's reserve deposits, the unanticipated revenue coming from capital gains, we would have anticipated that the state's going to have a higher obligation to put money into the reserves because of the way that those accounts function. In addition to that, we know this because we live and die by Proposition 98, of course, right? So every time there's a fluctuation in state revenues, Proposition 98 follows that suit. So if the state revenues are increasing, the state's obligation to fund education also increases. So this is why Proposition 98 is doing really well under these updated revenue assumptions. According to the LAO's revenue estimates, they believe that when you reconcile the Proposition 98 books for 24-25 and 25-26, the state owes us an additional $7.4 billion. They should have, had we gotten those revenues accurate for those 2 fiscal years, they would have paid us $7.4 billion more across those 2 fiscal years. So in that way, that's good. But then we also have this on the flip side of it, from an ongoing perspective, ongoing revenues in Proposition 98 are not expected to perform as well, and we can talk about that later.
And folks, if you have questions for Patti, go ahead and put those into the chat, and we'll try and get to some of those at the end of the show. Patti, I want to ask you about the LAO's forecast on the structural deficits, because they're saying approximately $35 billion annually starting in 27-28. Now, the governor and the Department of Finance, historically balanced the budget. But what is then the long-term impact on Prop 98? I mean, should we be concerned about the future impact on 98?
I do think we should. I mean, this is something that I am exaggerating a little bit when I tell you that it keeps me up at night, But that is my job here at School Services. I am supposed to keep an eye on the minimum guarantee for education. You guys see me present all the time on Proposition 98. I invite anybody at any time to nerd out with me on the minimum guarantee if they want to. But this is something that I've been looking at, and we've been having internal conversations about the state budgets, the deteriorating condition of the state budget, and what that means for Proposition 98. And the reason why it causes me concern is because let's just assume on average, Proposition 98 consumes about 40 cents of every state dollar, right? The state spends 40 cents of every dollar on education. And if they have a growing budget problem, it's hard for the state to balance the budget with a growing budget problem without looking to Proposition 98 as a solution, as one of their solutions, when 40% of the state budget is going to education. And so if they don't get a handle on that growing budget deficit, I do think that Proposition 98 becomes vulnerable, right? The way that the legislature, without manipulating the minimum guarantee, which we know that they have tried in the past and have been, there have been lawsuits filed against prior manipulations of the minimum guarantee, but we know that they have the constitutional authority to provide less funding under Proposition 98 than they are obligated to by suspending the guarantee through a 2/3 vote of the legislature. They did that a couple of years ago or a few years ago when they didn't have the financial wherewithal to pay the minimum guarantee. So I worry that is going to become an issue for the legislature and the governor and the future governor as these deficits get bigger and bigger.
Patti, on that note, so
we can hear you.
Is that me?
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was having some technical difficulties on my end. My apologies. Patti, a question for you related to that. So if Prop 98 becomes vulnerable, kind of play this out. What were the fears then? Well, obviously not having the amount of funding, and I think about one of the pieces that you're always good about in school services in general, that you also think about the macro picture, right? You always constantly are citing what the Anderson School at UCLA is saying and whatnot. So just take us a step back. If this vulnerability, kind of continues, what would be some of the fears there?
My fear, and we've had this conversation internally at School Services, is that is that the legislature and the governor did something this past year when they passed the budget that I think establishes a dangerous precedent for education funding in California. And that is what was referred to as the settle-up payment of $1.9 billion. You guys will remember that for the 24-25 fiscal year, the governor and the legislature said to education, we know by our own revenue estimates that we're using to pass this budget that we owe education about $120 billion. But we're only going to appropriate $118 billion. They called that $2 billion outstanding obligation a settle-up. And that was, frankly, a novel use of the settle-up provisions of Proposition 98. That has never been done before. They preemptively created settle-up. The way that my mind translated that action that was included in the budget is that they use Proposition 8 and the settle-up mechanism as a zero interest credit card for the state of California, because they used the $2 billion they didn't appropriate in June to plug some other hole on the other side of the budget. So as these deficits as these budget deficits for the state of California get bigger and bigger and bigger, what appetite will they find to use the mechanism that they used in this budget? That's very unsettling to me. And there's legal reasons why that's unsettling to me in terms of the lack of protection and provisions in the Constitution, as well as in the statutes for controlling that behavior and that budget mechanism. It's this year. So let me put some terms on it. This year they decided that they needed to borrow $2 billion from Proposition 98. There's nothing in the Constitution nor in the statutes that limit the size that they can borrow or hold back from us. And then there's very few constraints on and when would the state have to pay us back for those dollars. So if the budget deficit goes from 18 billion to 35 billion, are they going to be satisfied with withholding $1.9 billion from us? Or are they going to be like, you know what? We're going to have to withhold $8 billion from education. And we'll pay you guys back sometime in the future. That is a little troubling to me.
Patti, Neri asked a question that was kind of along the lines that something I was going to throw out to you. And I know we in jest, we make fun of John here. I know he was working hard. And one of the things that we know he's working really hard is on the negotiation front, right? Helping folks across the state. And I know that's one of the big things that school services does for our folks around the state is kind of keeping the track of helping them at the bargaining table. And we've seen, obviously, Contra Costa made some news here in the last couple of weeks. We've talked about some of the bigger efforts from some of our labor partners. Neri asked how are districts, unions expecting to do raises given this atmosphere that you talk about. But maybe on that note, give us a lay of the land. What are you all seeing in terms of at the bargaining table around the state, despite some of the circumstances that we're seeing play out?
We're seeing an increase in local pressure at the table. And I shared, I was at a CBO meeting last Friday, and I said, let me just share with you my week. I said, one morning I woke up and I went into the office and I talked to Matt Phillips and I said, tell me what's going on at the negotiations table. And he said, we've got about 5 to 6 districts heading to fact finding. The very next morning, I'm having a similar conversation with John Gray, and I asked him, I said, boss, what are we hearing about, the negotiations? West Contra Costa was still, I think they were just about to strike. And John said to me within 24 hours that he was expecting, we were looking at about 12 districts going straight to fact finding. I can tell you that John and Matt right now are not getting any sleep. They are fully engaged, preparing districts who are going through the impasse mediation and fact-finding process. We expect this to heat up in the late winter, early spring, because of the impacts of what we refer to as P2. When districts report their final attendance numbers in the middle of March, if labor wants to strike, the time for them to strike that will have the most impact is before districts report their final attendance numbers, because if they strike after that, it costs the district no money, right? For students not to show up to school, they're going to get their funding. But if the strikes happen before that cutoff deadline in the middle of March-ish, and they see a drop in student attendance, districts will feel that financially. And so we believe that things are going to get pretty aggressive here in the coming 2 months.
Yeah, I was going to say there's an article, and I'm struggling to find it, by John Fensterwald over at EdSource. I think he had a figure of the number of districts that were in that situation at the bargaining table, where they're trying to line up a number of these districts on the exact same annual terms, so that if there's a pivot, they're all going out at the exact same time. If I'm able to find that, definitely put that into the chat. Let me ask you, Patti, about
it's the We Can't Wait. It's the We Can't Wait campaign, Naj, and coalition. And there's to our last estimate that there was about 33 districts across the state.
There you go. There you go. Let me ask you about the big picture with the federal government, because usually as districts start going into the budget process for their own budget process, there's that money that comes from the federal government that they can kind of plan upon. But I think that if there's one thing we've learned this year, is our federal government does a lot of, push and pull when it comes to the federal dollars coming in. Just through your lens, what should districts be preparing for as we start this new budget cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And About a year ago, I probably would have given you a different answer than I am today, because some of the things that we've experienced this past year, as you were reflecting on earlier, is unprecedented, right? We would have never expected to go through what we went through this past year, particularly with federal action on federal education funding. I do think that it would be wise for districts to almost, create multiple budget scenarios, right? What would our budget look like with our federal funding versus what would our budget look like without federal funding, and where could we potentially backfill for the loss of federal funding if federal dollars don't materialize at all or at our current levels. One of the things that I want to acknowledge are two things. Two things I want to acknowledge. One, from an LEA perspective, federal funding is a small percentage of total revenues that they get. They get the lion's share of, you guys all get your lion's share of federal, your funding from the state, much less so from the federal government. So from a percentage perspective, it should be manageable. And especially if the budget comes out the way that it does, with the LAO saying we're going to have $7.4 billion in one-time money. This could potentially, depending on how the legislature and the governor appropriate those dollars, it could potentially give districts a little bit of cushion to backfill for any reductions as they plan to address any reductions in federal funding, if it should be longstanding. The other thing that I want to acknowledge is that while it's a small percentage at a district level for school sites, particularly school sites with high populations of students that generate Title I or Title III dollars, at school sites, that's very impactful. It has very impactful programmatic implications. And I do want to acknowledge that. So the question, I think, for the district is, how do you manage the impact to the sites through your budget planning? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Yep.
Patti, one last question for me. I mean, you talk about, December's always spent a lot of time reflecting back the things that we were dealing with, both on, and I almost remember how this year started. Not our attention turns to obviously the changes in DC and the administration and whatnot, but even before that, I mean, just to think about the turmoil that really started with like the fires in Southern California and the uncertainty, not to mention like the horrific pain that it caused so many of our communities down there. All right. And obviously it had ripple effects on what we saw, or even some uncertainty for the state level. As we're finishing up, 2025 and looking to the new year, what are the things that you're keeping an eye on? Obviously, we'll keep an eye on that January budget, but just big picture, what are the pieces that you're going to be paying attention to?
I don't think this will come as a surprise to any of you guys that have seen us talk about this at any of our big workshops or in any of the places where we are privileged enough to be invited to speak. So the big things are for us is, I want to recognize that last year at this time, when we did this, when we did the lunch break at this time, the January fires had not hit. We did not anticipate that. So I do think that we've got to, think about these natural events that could really have significant impact on us, and none of us would be able to anticipate that, right? But the things that we can anticipate are those things that I talked about in terms of that Proposition 98 settle up approach. I think that's something that we should all be really mindful of, and maybe we need to build some advocacy work around that to prevent the state from utilizing that mechanism, to make sure that dollars that are owed to education are given to education in a timely fashion, so that we can actually deploy them for our use at the local level. In addition to that, we are still monitoring the delicacy of the economy, the macro economy. And I feel we're not through the woods yet on what way the economy can turn. And we know that there's a lot of pressure on the labor market right now that the Federal Reserve is trying to regulate through monetary easing policies. But if we don't get a handle on that, the economy can take a significant turn. And right now, the rate of growth in our economy is so low that it's such that any turn in the economy could really have a significant impact. So that's something that we are still watching very, very closely.
You know what's great, Edgar, about Patti is Patti's experience here, and knowing that she's been on this show more times than John Gray. Every time John comes on, he has these predictions and I write them on the paper here. And then the next time he's on, I go, well, John, you didn't get this one right. John, you didn't get this one right. Patti was very broad in the subject matter there, so we can't go back and ask her specifics on anything that she missed. Very well played, Patti. Well played. Patti Herrera.
I do have one prediction.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, the LAO said that the COLA for 26-27 is estimated to be about 2.51%. I think that I think that they're relatively like spot on with that COLA estimate. I don't think that it's going to get up to that 3% that the Department of Finance thought it would get to in June. So if I get this wrong, you don't have to invite me back next year.
Now I feel like if you get right or wrong, we're gonna have to come bring you back. Don't worry about that. Patti Herrera, Executive Vice President of School Services of California. Patti, happy holidays to you and your family, and we'll see you in 2026.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, Patti.
Edgar, Patti had some really interesting, outlook on the federal funding piece, on collective bargaining, there was just so much there. Your reflections though on 2025, because you talked about it, Patti talked about, unprecedented times in 2025. We've had so many challenges. Just your thoughts, your reflections on this year as we move into 2026.
Yeah, I mean, we live sometimes in the policy world and we think about what happened in DC or bills or the budget. I think my biggest takeaway is that, in this year, especially early on, I think about we spent a lot of time preparing folks, whether it be, I almost think our show here is a microcosm of the issues that are percolating in the field, in the system, right? And so what was it? It was the immigration rate and trying to calm some of the concerns there. Obviously, some impacts on enrollment. I think as Patti mentioned, I was thinking about it, just like what a tough beginning of the year we had with those fires, right? With the challenges it created for so many in Southern California and other parts of the state. That January was a really tough month for so many reasons, right? So really just getting started there. So I think now moving forward is I'd be real curious just to see, yes, there's the pieces on the budget and how we'll adapt and how we move forward. But it is going to be a year of change as we're setting ourselves up from a governance standpoint, from a political standpoint. There's a lot of conversations here in Sacramento about potential changes. We'll see, to what extent some of those come to fruition. But I think those are some of the pieces that come to mind. And then, on the kind of nuts and bolts is things keep continuing to evolve with AI and what does that mean for our educators? What does that mean in the classroom? What does it mean for our support? And I think we're living at a time where things are changing so quickly. So what does that mean in terms of our support and what we do for our folks in the field?
Well, and I think it's worth mentioning, if we can just talk about our respective family here on the lunch break, we brought on some really impactful guests. 2 out of 3 weeks, we had 2 Secretary of Education's former Secretaries of Education, Arnie Duncan and John King on. Of course, we talked so much right at January 2025 about the changes in DC. And the impact on the budget and the impact on our school districts. We hit the 5-year anniversary here of the lunch break. We've now done more than 200 episodes of the lunch break. I mean, it's been, an incredible year, but stuff for our district certainly to plan for as we head into 2026.
Yeah, a little feather in our cap, right? We made it through 5. Hopefully we have some more in us here. So yeah, we appreciate people continuing to show up. People continue to show up, then I guess we got to be here, right? It'd be a little awkward if it was just you and me, Naj. So.
It would absolutely be. Folks, want to tell you about our Every Child Counts Symposium. That is January 12th through 14th in San Diego. It is the biggest conference that we have. Take a look. Yes, that is our Every Child Counts Symposium, January 12th through 14th in San Diego. You saw a couple of our keynotes in that promo video there. Kim and Penn Holderness, they are famous, a little bit more famous, Edgar, than you and I are. We have done a full interview with them. You can see that here on our YouTube channel. Invite you to take a look at that. They are such a powerful duo, and I can guarantee their keynote is a must watch. So definitely get registered for that. ACSA.org/professional-learning to register for that event. If you like what you've seen here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. When you subscribe and you turn on your notifications, you'll get instant alerts when Edgar and I are going to come on with breaking news, and then a reminder about our regularly scheduled Wednesday show. And if you have great stories happening in your school communities, we want to tell those stories too. Go ahead and send your photos, your talking points, your news releases to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, mcarl@axa.org. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you can also catch us on LinkedIn. So Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and it so many different platforms, Edgar, that you can see us. So anyway, folks, it's been a great 2025. We look forward to seeing you with our entire robust budget coverage first week of January. Until then, have a great rest of the day, rest of the week. Happy holidays to you. And we look forward to seeing you next time here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break.